Why are there so many different translations of the Bible? This is actually an argument that I've heard people use as a reason not to take the Bible seriously, because there's so many different translations. The short answer is that the scholars and the people who value the original language of the Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic are just doing the best that they can to make the Bible as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. You see, there's a huge difference between translation and interpretation, and we're going to discover that some of the Bibles that have been deemed a translation are actually a paraphrase, which would fall under the category of interpretation. But translation, just for the Bible, is exactly the same as it is for anything that we would translate today, from Spanish or Japanese into English, or from Cantonese into German, right? What you're doing is taking the original language and trying to determine what's the best way to communicate the meaning of that word in the language we want it to be understood in. And these languages, ancient Hebrew, ancient Greek, Aramaic, the dead languages that don't exist anymore, we're relying on scholars and doctors who have studied and know these ancient languages and what they mean to convey to us and communicate what does that mean in our language. And yes, there are several translations given into different other languages, but for some reason, there's especially a lot of translations in English. We have the New International Version, New American Standard Version, Contemporary English, English Standard. I mean, you open up the Bible app, there's this seemingly endless list of translations that seems to grow every day. So what's happening here? Well, the original language is rich and it's deep with meaning. Sometimes some of the words that are used are so rich with meaning that a simple one-word translation into English isn't enough to convey the meaning. So some translations want to make an effort where they say, how can we convey this in the most accurate, complete way possible? And you'll get some translations like the Amplified or the New American Standard. And these are examples of translations that use as many English words as possible to try and capture the richness and the depth of the Hebrew, Greek, or Aramaic word that's being used. But there are some translations, like my personal favorite, the one you might see me waving around during Dumb Christian episodes, is the English Standard Version. So the reason why it's my favorite is because it's written at a 6th grade reading level. And so the scholars who went to work and say, how can we make this accessible to someone who might not be able to process or read through like a really intellectual translation? That's where this one comes into play. The message, however, of all the different translations are going to be the same. The word order might be different. Maybe it uses a slightly different word, but it's all conveying the same story. People sinned, broke relationship with God. They need someone better than themselves to fix the relationship with God. Enter Jesus, who pays the price, raises from the dead, fixes the relationship, and guarantees an eternal right relationship for those who believe in him. That's the same message regardless of the translation. Now, to put this to a test, I have a great book that you might be interested in. It's called the Comparative Study Bible. This is actually my old cousin's Bible. I inherited it when he passed, but it has 4 different versions. You can see here it has the Amplified, NIV, King James, which probably isn't going to be one many of us want to read, and the New American Standard Bible updated. And on every page, it's going to have all 4 translations so that you can compare side to side. Is it saying the same thing, or is it trying to tell me a radically different story? The problem, however, can be when we confuse a translation for a paraphrase. And sometimes paraphrase Bibles are actually lumped in with translation, and this can get confusing because a paraphrase is more accurately understood to be an interpretation. A paraphrase takes sometimes the original language and it says, this is what we're trying to convey. This is the meaning behind the message. Translations make room for each person to have to wrestle with, okay, what does this mean? Whereas a paraphrase tries to do that for you. So maybe you're left asking the question, okay, that's great, but which one is right for me? Like I said, sometimes they're written at different reading levels. Sometimes they're written with more explanation, sometimes with less. What did the original word mean? So I've heard some scholars and doctors say that the right translation to read is the one that you will read. Like I said, you might not be interested in reading the King James because it's Old English and it might be confusing and we might get lost in what it means. But ESV, English Standard, my personal favorite, 6th grade reading level. So the best translation for you to read is the one that you will read. Links are in the description below if you're interested in the Comparative Study Bible, the English Standard, or just in Bibles in general. You want to seek out and find your own. I encourage you to do so. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments below. Share it with your friends who might be asking the same question. Why are there so many different translations? Ring the bell so you know when new content drops. And I love you guys. I'll catch you later.